I'm Naked and Broke. Welcome back. I'm your host, Emmanuel Wisdom. Today I have a very special guest, one I've been excited for. She's a writer, activist, founder, and CEO of the Black Curriculum in the UK. Welcome to the show, Lavinya.
Thank you for having me, Emmanuel.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, blessed, and just excited.
Before we get into all the good that you're doing with the Black Curriculum, I try to keep up every now and then. I peek on the site. I want to check in with you and ask you, what are you most grateful for today?
I think I'm most grateful for having the ability to reflect, like the mental faculty still being able to not only think forward, but also reflect on, the past. I think it's a privilege to be alive. So yeah, I'm grateful for my mind and the ability to reflect. Yeah.
Yeah, that is such a great answer. I feel like a lot of gratitude comes out of reflection when you're able to, just take a moment and just understand your own journey and things like that, and how other things kind of came into play.
Mm.
A few days ago, I believe 2 days ago, someone in the lettering community, African American based in Chicago, I believe, passed away due to a motorcycle accident.
Oh no.
His name is Adeo, and he was such a great lettering artist. And it kind of put me in a similar mindset of just, reflecting on things. And for some reason, it felt kind of close just being in the design and lettering industry. But uh, similar to what you were saying, it kind of put me in the mood of just thinking about, the first time I looked up to actually pay attention to dates was in October. And I was like, wow, how did we even get here from January? Um,
Right.
so that put me in the sense of um, put me in the sense of gratitude and, just being grateful to be here and, another day under the sun and another day trying to connect.
100%. That's beautiful.
Do you consider yourself a creative person?
Creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
Because creativity, I think it's just a natural state of being. Like,
Mm.
I think sometimes the descriptor is like, oh, I think of myself as creative, or I can do something that's creative. But I think by virtue of just being, we are creative people. So, I definitely see that through my writing. The language that I use is creative. Some people would say it's a bit weird, but I enjoy being
Mm.
creative. Yeah, 100.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think, in my opinion, I think everyone is like you say, a creative being. I also believe that as well, and I think with time and society and the conditionings and programming that people kind of forget that we are all creative beings. We could dive more into your creativity and your writing. Um, I want to ask, how long have you been writing?
Um, all right. So the earliest picture of me writing was probably when I was four or
Wow.
five. Yeah, in school, I was always kind of just, I remember English classes were my favorite.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I remember like doing like very early like writing competitions and yeah, in class, just head down sort of thing. So yeah, since
Wow,
then.
that's amazing. Um, Math and English, I think, were my least favorite. I know
Least
math
favorite.
is definitely my least favorite class, but I love history. History was my favorite classes.
Oh
I
wow.
love learning about cultures and how people lived centuries ago, and being able to spot the similarities in how I was living in present
Oh,
time. Um,
yeah.
but do you remember the first story you wrote, or what it was about?
Not the first story, but I remember one of my first projects.
Mm.
It was like I had to write about like a holiday that I've been on. So almost like a diary entry. Um, And I kind of remember kind of alternating some of the facts in there to make it sound a lot more interesting. Um, we'd call that creative writing these days. So yeah, I remember that being like something that I was really proud of, and yeah, like an early task that I was certain.
Mm,
I still have it as well.
mm. What I want to talk about, like the state of mind you're in when you're writing. Um, I know for me as a designer and a creative, um, like I tap into a lot of different things, like experiences, um, emotions, or music, or things like that. I try to pull from those different things. But when I sit down to write, usually I try to create like environment, like mood. Most of the time, I'm working when it comes to drawing. I'm drawing either early in the morning, um, or late at night when there's barely anyone out or any noise. So I want you to speak a little bit about your writing process, and
Mm.
how you trying to put yourself in the mood to get into it.
Mm. Very, very good question. I feel like with my writing, I'm I'm trying to get into the practice of it, because I think with any kind of mastery of something, you've got to be able to practice and habitually do it. And so even when I don't feel like doing it, I will do it. And it doesn't look like candles and like music in the background. A lot of my writing is very kind of intuitive, and I would describe that as like whatever I feel, I'm gonna write it. And it sometimes just flows over like pages and pages and pages, because I have something so passionate to write about, or I'm feeling in a type of way and I just want to get it out on a piece of paper. So it doesn't look very nice, it's not tidy, but it's emotive and it's very strong. And I feel like those are the best types of writing, because it's just the process of letting it out.
Mm.
And then there are times where, on the opposite side, I have like a very kind of hyper focus. It's very kind of like mechanistic. So, perhaps I'm writing like an essay. I have to be able to kind of methodically break that down into like sections.
Right.
And then, really think about what my point is. And it's almost like you're not just weaving something together, but you're adding up, you're totaling things to create this larger picture. So it's a lot more, I'd say, like process driven than the other process that I just described. And then somewhere in the middle is, yeah, candles and music. And then there is that process of just being able to write very neatly and like be honest. And yeah, I think your environment sometimes is conducive to what actually the outcome is. And then sometimes when you look, you're like, I've really just spent an hour writing all of that amazing, and you feel really good and
Wow.
lifted after. So yeah.
Wow. Writing is something, like I told you earlier, wasn't necessarily my strong suit, but something I admire from afar. It's kind of ironic that I kind of do lettering. That's kind of close to writing, but it's not really writing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of writing, I always find myself kind of getting caught up, um, in, like you were saying, that initial kind of dump of like the information on ideas and going back to draft it. I always find myself getting caught up in that first step of getting out the ideas. Um, I try to refine them as much as possible before even getting the first draft done, which I think is not a good approach at all, because I'm always stuck in my head. And I think there might be a few other people out there that are kind of like me. What would you recommend in terms of just, I guess, breaking out of that shell, and just getting out the idea, and then, like you were saying, kind of going back and piecing it back together?
Mm. Um, well, kind of draw this back to an example that I think we'll talk more about, which is the Black curriculum. I
Mm.
remember feeling that I needed to do something. I needed to write, not the write, but I needed to have this idea kind of mapped out. And the first thing I'd done at the time was talk to my friend. Like, I remember calling them on FaceTime. I was like, there's this idea that I have. And they just literally talked, like repeated what I was saying back. And it helped me to kind of just see what I was thinking. And I think sometimes, like, as creatives, there's so many ideas and you can get really lost in your head. And yeah, there's like a block before you're able to really kind of have that process of getting it down. And so I find that talking really helps with me, because it kind of brings out into reality for you to see it, make sense of it. Okay, that doesn't make sense. And then another idea that you have might connect to what makes sense. So it's like talking it out and verbalizing it has a really profound effect for me anyway. So yeah, that's one thing. And maybe writing, but not in your typical way, maybe doing mind maps and little spider diagrams. They're the ones they taught us in school, the ones that they really shove down our faces. Sometimes they're useful.
Yeah, I am also excited to talk to you about definitely education and your perspective as well. Because I, like you're kind of hinted at, I felt like a lot of education I got was felt like it was force fed in a sense. But before we get into that, talk to me a little bit about the Black curriculum and when it started and how that came about.
Yeah, okay. So the Black curriculum, it's organization at the heart of what we're doing. It is really about empowering all students with a sense of identity and belonging through the teaching of Black history. So I started it 3 years ago, last month, so October 2019. The idea came to me, and it was really about kind of on a national level, making sure that there was an institution, if you like, or a national project that really oversaw how that teaching looked like, and that there was a kind of broader framework to ensure the mandatory teaching of it, because it was not mandatory, and it's still not mandatory in England. It is now in Wales. But that means that sometimes, or a lot of the time, young people go through education learning about one type of Black history, namely slavery, like once a year in October, which is Black History Month in the UK. So I wanted something that could just change that. And so I set up the organization in 20, sorry, I said 3 years ago, I'm going to correct myself, so that's 2018, October 2018. And then in 2019, we became an organization. And yeah, so we train teachers. We also encourage, schools to kind of rethink their curriculum. So we provide a range of services with schools. And we also directly teach students, which is why we started. It's, kind of circumnavigating the system, getting that information to students who need it.
I thought it was very powerful, just even hearing about the Black curriculum. But with the idea, were you like still in school or post school when that idea came to you?
The idea came to me when I was still in my last year of university. So I just finished a semester in New Zealand as part of my second year. And then I came straight into third year, and then the idea was, it was already there. So I had to balance that as well as studying. And then once I graduated, I went straight into the Black curriculum full time.
That's amazing. Very similar to, we were talking a little bit about, my studio in Philly. Very similar to kind of my approach to it. I think the idea junior year most likely came to me, and I remember writing down names and focusing on websites and things like that. And then I started just to write down ideas of like things I wanted to do, people I want to work with, what kind of design and things like that. And by the time I graduated, which was maybe a year and some months after that, I had a few jobs offered that was on the table. I turned them all down. Went out to Cali and realized Cali was expensive. Came back to Philly, and I started the studio.
Amazing.
I want to say 6 months after graduation. But before that, I think you and I had connected, and around the same time. And I have to say, I'm always in awe of what you are able and is able and still continue to do with the Black curriculum, because it's such a powerful thing. Just the little slight misdirection or redirection of people in the end to serve a greater purpose. I think of it as like golfing. The slightest angle could have that ball land, yards and yards away from where it was supposed to. And so I always think of it as, the smallest seed, or turn into a forest somehow,
Right.
if it's cared for. So I've always appreciated that. And when I started working on the studio, and again thinking of kind of the brain of what to center the studio around, and thinking about like core values and things, was around the same time I worked with you. And then another friend of mine who was in Scranton started an organization called Black Scranton, which is a nonprofit focused on just unearthing the history of the Black people that was in Scranton, that built
Wow.
Scranton, and a lot of that history was buried for years and years. And she and I connected, and it was very similar to what you was doing in the UK, and somehow I was in the middle of it, and that really kind of shaped the mind of my brand,
Mm.
kind of turned it made it a bit more conscious, I would say. And I was thinking like post Black curriculum and post Black Scranton, I was definitely thinking about more of the afterlife, and the impact of my work, and what I was putting into the world, as far as being on a professional stage. And so I've always appreciated the fact that our connection came about. I'm not sure how it came about, but definitely appreciated how it came about, and was very felt honored and grateful to have worked with you, um, with designing the visual look for the Black curriculum.
Well, yeah, no, it's mutually valued as well, that connection. And I think what you just mapped out there is the journey, and you meet people at the right time, and the people that you don't meet, the rejections that you face, is just a redirection to where you're supposed to get to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for being courageous in your journey, as well, and trusting the universe was going to connect those dots, because that was what I was doing on mine as well. And like you said, it's great to kind of reflect and see how those pieces came together.
Yeah.
Someone I think you probably is familiar with, that I recently became familiar with, I believe last January,
Mhm.
was Queen Nanny of the Maroons.
Oh yeah.
Um, I worked on a project with a studio I was in during the pandemic, um, for a movie production company called Yard Girl. Um,
Mhm.
and the founder, Diane Robinson, a great lady. Um, she and I was chatting, and the brand Yard Girl came about because of the I guess that was kind of like the name that was called to the females that was working, call them Yard Girl, something like that. So she wanted to put a spin on that, and she told me about the story of Queen of the Maroons and her participation, and her fight for the liberation of the people of Jamaica. And it was so like powerful, just kind of hearing that story, that I felt like, like you're saying with history and education, that I felt like that should have been something that should have been given to me a lot earlier when I was younger, as far as coming up in the tiers of education.
Mm.
But you probably know a lot more about her than I do. So could you speak a little bit on what she means to you?
So for those that don't know, Nanny, well, yeah, informally known as Nanny, Nanny of the Maroons, was a Jamaican freedom fighter, leader of one of the Maroon communities, which is a term or a name used to describe communities who created their own communities outside of the institution of slavery, of enslavement. And so often they would find environments in the hills, and would kind of defend themselves away from European powers. So Nanny was a leader, and I think, to me, not only is she like a national hero, um, international hero, I think she's definitely like someone who possessed a understanding of what was like right, and followed her conviction. to be able to, inspire other people to follow suit, but also for herself, lead with integrity, which I think is important for any leader as well. Like knowing what you stand for and your values, not taking that from anyone as well, is really key. So I was about to cuss, I don't want to cuss, but yeah. So
if you're emotionally driven, let it out.
so, yeah, Nanny, I think to me just symbolizes like hope, and it sounds very like airy fairy, but it's definitely hope in the sense that if you believe in something, it can absolutely get done. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also she was such a powerful figure for me, and the timing of how I came to knowing about her was, I think, shortly after. Actually, it was right before the killing of George Floyd in America, and and that was so tragic and disheartening, that it was even like hard to like function, and through that project, just like learning about her, and just like you were saying, all the things she had to overcome, and most importantly, being a female in that time, and standing up for not just herself but the people and what was right, and fighting for longevity. Um, and I thought that was very, very powerful, and that kind of um, gave me a lot of hope for the future. And also, it told me that like the fight is a global thing. It's not a I feel like a lot of like media try to like section it out as far as you from Jamaica, Haiti, or America or Africa. Try to make it seem like it's like different problems, but I believe it's one problem that globally, people of all African descent has to recognize and tap into, on a global scale. So just learning about the story of Queen of Maroon, that helped me, on a global sense, to just kind of take a step back and again just reflect, and not have a irrational reaction to what was happening, but put logical steps, actionable steps in play that I could, not just for myself, but the people that was around me as well. Um, but you mentioned October, Black History Month, which was last month in the UK. Our Black History Month is, I think, February, I believe. I celebrate Black History every day, so it doesn't mean much to me. But it is a liberating a month for some people. So as a whole, definitely, it's nice to celebrate, if not at least recognize. But I was doing some digging, and I saw your post from 2018 for I believe HuffPost.
Yeah.
And the title was "Why I Wouldn't Be Celebrating Black History Month in its current form, and Why You Shouldn't Either." I thought that was a powerful blog post. I read it, and I agree with the structure of what you were saying, and at the core of what you were saying, I agree with that as well. I pull a quote from there that I'd like for you to expand on, that I'm going to share. You said, when Black Britons grow up learning a version of that history that is depicted as passive, uneducated, and a violent monolith, all under a month deemed to be empowering. The message that it relayed is an attack on one ontological density, spelling out a reality of being at the bottom of society. It silences current Black British voices and fades out the work of Black British civil rights activists and pioneers in a multiplicity of fields. You went on to say, one of the major focus of one of the major focus in Britain schools curriculum is misconstrued idea that Black history, Black people living in the UK, began slowly as slaves. I want you to, speak a little bit more on that, because I agree with the fact that I guess you could kind of analyze and see the similarity in how Black history is set up as well in the U.S. Where I feel that the parts that shouldn't necessarily be highlighted from a historical point of view is highlighted in a way that is educational, but same kind of demanding as well when you kind of look at it in that sense. So I want you to speak a little bit more on what you were saying in that blog post.
Yeah, that was so long ago, and I see the writing. I'm like, this is definitely university writing. We're just thankful for the growth. The essence of what I was trying to convey is that these really flat, linear narratives that we are getting around Black history, particularly around the narrative of slavery, is a very disempowering narrative. It's an inaccurate narrative, and it disempowers people. When we're looking at European constructions of Blackness and, what is deemed to be like moral and what is deemed to be right, what we're actually kind of understanding through this is that there is an association of Blackness to be the opposite of those things, right? And that was the starting point. It was really kind of trying to understand, well, if we're looking back into history, to pick out certain works like by authors such as Joseph Conrad, where he explains that, in his book, The Heart of Darkness, like Black people would be like no souls. It's just very, these narratives are very, very harmful because there's no recognition of our humanity within that. And so, starting at that baseline for me was the point of that article, because without us recognizing that humanity, there is really no progression. Whether or not we want to stick on a Black History Month, whether or not we want to perform some quotas in the workplace, and whether or not we decide to maybe create a film about Black people, if there is no recognition of our humanity within that, and therefore the active work that we are doing, it contributes more and more to the erasure. So I think for me, these gesture, very tokenistic actions that we often do see, serve no purpose if we're not engaging with the people on the ground, if we're not engaging with current people who are creating history, because we're active, we're alive. And I think it's just recognizing that humanity as the baseline before we, start to do other types of things that celebrate Blackness.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that is not just in the past, but something that is still now to this day being stripped away from people of African descent, is our our humanity and our dignity. That in my opinion is not something that someone gives you. It's something you have to realize you have already and uphold it. But as far as the conditioning of where we are currently are right now, it certainly do feel that way, because it's more of a mental battle now. But to your point of what you were saying about it feeling like the feeling that it gives off, me being a visual person, I've always off putting by the fact that anything that had to do with Black history or slavery were shackles and chains, and just and something I compared to, I don't know if you have seen it or have seen the movie cover, Schindler's List, thing about the Holocaust, but the cover of that is a man holding a child's hand, and there's a list of names. And I thought that was such a powerful cover because it's very, one, it's inviting to any race of person. Two, I guess it's more easier. I'm not a Jewish person, so I can speak from that perspective. But I would imagine that it's most easier for them to consume, their own history. and protective, and not have some sort of aggressive nature to it, as trying to separate themselves from what happened in the past, because I feel like that's what a lot of people of African descent, Black Americans, anywhere you are, kind of feel, is that what we are being fed is not how we feel, and certainly is not, definitely, that from an image perspective, is definitely not how the people who was going through those harsh conditions felt. um, and the humanity is in the survival story, because that was the only thing that kept them going, is love, for one another as humans, even though said people didn't look at them that way, but they saw each other that way, and that was what was sustaining for them. And so from a visual perspective, I've always been outputting about a lot of like Black history or slave history that surrounds Black people. And in America, I don't know about the UK, but in America, they're very aggressive. Like 12 years of slaves everywhere. They put it all in your face. And yeah, it's just very kind of weird to kind of sit with. And also, and to your point, trying to take it all in within a month. Imagine if you're going to the gym and you just went super hard just 1 month, and that was it. You probably shouldn't have gone at all. So that's how I feel about the 1 month as a history thing, and trying to, and in my opinion, I think the best approach is trying to have people understand. Yeah, it's out there and it's structured that way, but it's not something you have to follow necessarily. And you could celebrate whenever, you could do anything whenever. And like I said, for me, I think now, with the progression of time and technology and society, I think it's more of a mental thing now, rather than like physical, and definitely starts with education, for sure.
Right. I really like what you said about the mental aspect of it, and feeding that into the repetition is psychologically damaging. And I think, on the other hand, if there's nothing to counter that, or nothing
Right.
of substance to counter it, then you're almost going to either believe it or disassociate completely.
Exactly.
And so what we've seen is that, like, there is on the opposite end, like, very pro radical images, but would say radical. Maybe you have like a picture of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and Malcolm X, but there's no like engagement with what that actually means and how it applies to people today, which is important.
Yeah. And you speak of Malcolm X. One of the, actually, so my studio, UNA, short for Unapologetic Design Company, the mental aspect of it, it's modeled after teachings of Malcolm X, my favorite figure in history. But one of the most powerful image of him, I think a lot of people are familiar with, to expand on the conversation we are talking about of image, is, I think he's by the window with, I don't know, with a gun by the window peeking out. And most people don't know what the context of that image is. That was, after his house was, like, people threw him bricks at his house, threatening to bomb his house. His family, he had, I think, 2 daughters. And so, like, people didn't understand the context of what that image meant. And then that image became a symbol of by any means necessary, where now people are attaching the violent nature to a Black person, and again, supposed to be a leader. And so if you're looking at the leader as a violent person, then obviously the followers, or the people in the group, are like-minded. And again, and I think that image alone kind of took a lot away from who he was as a man. And and then I've been, kind of realizing a lot of that in other figures as well, with the likes of MLK, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and some other people for a while, where the message is good in what they do, but in terms of like ownership and all of that, they themselves don't control that. So the people who control that is able to kind of dictate the story and how the forever storyline goes, which is the most important thing.
Teach them, because I did not know that, but you touched on a really, really good point: the manufacturing of these people in history, and it's images are really powerful. 100%.
Yeah, it really is, and like I just told you, my studio model after Malcolm X. I never met him. I wasn't born in his time, and so all I had was images that pulled me in, and then I was wise enough to step aside and read more, and put in my own research, and that's something that other people don't do. That they just get stuck with what they're fed, and they kind of defend that concept with their lives. But like I said, for me, I had to rely on those images to pull me in, and so if I solely just relied on what was given to me, I probably would have had a misdirection in what he was trying to do, and I'm still definitely learning to the best of my abilities as well. We have a neighbor going by, obviously. Perfect timing. But you have a book coming out, spring of 2023, titled Omitted. You want to talk a little bit more about that, and what people can hope to learn about African American history, and a little bit about themselves?
Yeah, sure. So the book, yes, it's called Omitted. It's out. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order it. It's out in 2023. And the premise of the book is Black histories that we don't know that will have an impact on our future. So it's really kind of thinking about what are the untold stories that really have shaped our reality today. And I'm touching on not only UK history, I'm touching on parts of the Caribbean, obviously countries within Africa, also parts of African American history, in order to piece together this wider story that will enable us to actually make concrete changes. So, leading up to the death of George Floyd, and I only use this as a case in point because the book came from that. There were a lot of kind of reception to Black organizations and Black work as a result of his murder. But do we know what are the lessons that led to there, right? And what are the parallels in history that we can draw on so that we can ensure, we are protected as a community, we are knowledgeable, and we also have the tools and the armor to go forward. So I think, education is where it starts. So it's really thinking about social history, but giving that lesson as well. So I see it as a very kind of poetic book that weaves in my own experiences as well. So yeah, I'm currently writing a chapter that is deeply personal, but I'm hoping that, not only is my experiences as an activist, but some of the other broader experiences that I know a lot of other Black people have gone through in the UK, wider social lessons are shown, and yeah, with the hope of us actually learning it.
It's powerful. I like the fact that you are trying to unearth different history of different parts and put them together. So you're currently working on the book, and it's going to be out spring of 2023, title Omitted. Was there a second part to the title?
The untold Black history lessons that we should know for our future.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we were just talking, history is a very powerful thing, and depending on how it's told, it could help shape the mind of someone in a negative or positive way. But a little bit, we were speaking about Black figures. I want to ask you, did you know something I recently found out? Did you know Beethoven was black?
I did. I heard about it on Twitter.
It was that
I think
was
I think there was a thread, and I was like, wow. Just, I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. But yeah, it's definitely disappointing that I didn't know that earlier.
yeah, but I felt the same way, and to the point we were stressing earlier about like having the history being there, but not fully educating. Like I've known Beethoven since I
Mhm.
don't know since I don't even know what grade I was in, but I've known him like forever in the music and everything, and so, but not once did someone speak on the person, um, but it was always talked about in the sense that this was some kind of Caucasian person. Um, and and yeah, but finding that out was kind of odd. I
Mm.
felt kind of late to some sort of party. um,
Mm.
but at the
And
same
how did you reconcile that?
um for me, like I said, like since being a kid, history has been like my favorite subject. I'm not necessarily, or I wasn't necessarily too surprised, and even with um the unlawful murder of George Floyd, when that happened, um, I remember feeling numb, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised that it happened. Um,
Mhm.
and 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 for me, I always try to like compare and contrast, but with the Beethoven thing, I found out most likely probably through a friend or something. And I just remember we were chatting about it, and she was a musician, or still is a musician, and she didn't even know. And she was like, "Yeah, I found out recently too," and so like it was crazy. Um, but I don't know if you're familiar with Burner Boy music. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
my favorite um, African artists, him and Run Town. Um, just insane. But he put out a song, I don't know, not too long ago, titled Monsters with another person. I don't know if you remember uh, um, or have listened to it. Sorry. But in the song, he talked, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he talked about like the education that is being fed to Black kids in Africa. And
Mm.
he said something along the lines of him growing up and not paying attention in school because um, the teachers were teaching European lessons in his African school that he didn't connect with. So he was, misbehaving and cutting school and not fully paying attention. And I think a lot of part of that is, in a lot of um, other communities and other countries where as a person you're being, given this history. And I believe truly as people, our intuition allow us to know what's true and what's false when we're kids. And like we were stating earlier about our mental faculties, that a lot of people kind of you know are pulled away from tapping into that mental God-given mental faculties to allow them to stay at the core or kind of know if they're off center or what's true or not. But I feel like a lot of like when we're little, we all have that, and we're able to kind of take in information with maybe raising an eyebrow and or if it's well said, then taking it in wholeheartedly. But I feel like part of what he said with skipping school because of certain reason and not connecting to the education that was given to him. I think as a kid, I felt that as well, where like I never felt the need for the education that was given to me because it didn't correlate with my environment and it didn't correlate with the people and it didn't correlate with the most importantly the culture that I was in. So a little bit about me. I spent my early childhood in West Africa, um, Liberia, and then I came to the U.S. in '09, and I attended middle school and high school and college. And so it's like this clash of of things. And for me, history was always something that for me always stayed the same, regardless. Even when I was in Africa, I was learning about white people, like white historical figures, um, for no reason, absolutely no reason. And then I came to the U.S. and I was like, okay, they got history here, but they aren't teaching me about Black people. I was learning about white people, and when I was in history, when I was in Africa, and I'm over here when I'm being fed about Black people, it's not as in depth, or it's not as good as what I was learning about those quote unquote white founders, colonizers in the early days. And Liberia, a little bit about the history of Liberia. Gained its independence in 1840, 45 or 47. And one of the first oldest country in Africa to be independent, and came about because Liberia was a location selected by, I guess, slave owners and other people in the U.S. at the time, to be a spot for the runaways and the quote unquote hard-headed slaves, meaning humans who knew the fact that they weren't slaves. And so they packaged all of these people and shipped them out and told them they were going to be free. And so that land became Liberia, and the motto of Liberia is set up similarly to the U.S. Even like streets names and things out there is all in the U.S. The flag is the same. It's very odd to me. But what was crazy to me as a kid learning about the history was these people were sent there to be free, but that very first president was a white person. And so that didn't sit right to me, that these people were free and they, could run their own countries and do their own things. Yet the very first president was a white person of the very first Black independent country. And so it's, in terms of the image, when you look at the time, they were probably like, yeah, it's probably best. But again, speaking of longevity, the story is always going to be that people of African descent aren't able to get from A to B without the help of a white person. And I think that's at the core of all Black history. That's not necessarily true, but it's always written and said that way. And so at a very early age, I always kind of picked apart things. And then when I came to the US, I was learning about just like civil rights or civil war figures and generals over here. And I remember remember my first experience in history class. The teacher was asking me about there's a general called Ulysses S. Grant, and I was like, I don't know about him. But it was very clashing in terms of just understanding that regardless, understanding where you grow up, your perspective could be very different on people and the understanding of things. That was when I started to expand my just like knowledge for just figures. And that's just, and most of the things now that even I consume now is like it's not so much about race. It's about what's needed for me as an individual. But I'm very mindful because of the fact that I also have siblings, and representation is key in the littlest of things or department or anything that I do. Um, I want you to speak a little bit on representation and what you think it means in terms of um, preparing for the future. Going off of the title of your book.
So much to meditate on there. Representation, I think, as a concept is something that we morally, maybe not morally, more ethically, kind of more inclined to want to believe in this idea of having representative beliefs, representative people, to really kind of ground who we are, our ideas, our belief systems, and kind of give us that air of credibility and movement within the world. So I think it's something that everybody kind of does look for, every human being, that idea of being represented. I would like to say that within that there is maybe a disconnect between what we need as people and what is needed for us to progress within the system. So when we're thinking about like representation as Black people within maybe the UK, I know that I cannot see someone who looks like me in a place of power and then give them that full trust, because of the fact that that representation is a creation of the system that we are in. And that's my personal belief. I think, though, it is very powerful for younger people. It is really powerful for those who haven't seen other forms of representation to see that as something that they can not aspire to, but understand that it is possible, and that there are forms of like growing and achieving in this world that, you know, is possible for everybody. But I think the damage and the danger rather comes in when we see that as the only form of progression, because representation in the system means that you have to almost you know, have identical beliefs to the status quo. Sometimes it means that you have to maybe sacrifice some of your values. I'm not saying this is the case for everything and everyone, but I think sometimes the weight of representation, you know, makes us overlook the power of resilience and the power of being able to have agency and do things ourselves. So I would say that I love the idea, but I proceed with an air of trepidation, because I've seen how it plays out in history, and I see how often so much credit is given to it, and that there is no kind of that carrot that was dangling disappears. So I think representation is important, but I think we've got to just be very cautious about who we give that air of credibility to for ourselves, and instead of looking for it from the system, look for it within.
That's very powerful. Search from within. It's always something I try to do whenever I feel off center. I'm just, regardless of what the situation is, just like, you know, like what's needed, or on my end that, you know, could get me to the next level or get me better understanding of things. So I really like how you kind of put that, as far as, you know, acknowledging what's out there, taking what you need, but, you know, searching deeper from within. It's very powerful. I want to talk to you. I feel like it's kind of been intense a little bit since we jumped in, but want to, you know, turn up the volume a little bit. Why not? I'm sure, you know, like there's adversity and things everywhere, but being a young Black woman, I'm sure it's even magnifying that sense of like accomplishments and things in the world. Because something I'm being more not like in the past, that I guess like the awareness was not necessarily there until my little sister was born in 2010, and just like watching her grow and understanding how like different she is from me, and understanding the requirements that she would need in the world or from the world. It's very different from, you know, me and my perspective, and my little brother's perspective is very different, and the different need of like catering. And, you know, it's something that's not, you know, like evenly played out when you talk about, you know, the gender roles. And then when you talk about, you know, women, it's a different thing. And then you have Black women who were in most time very, you know, being stepped on. But, you know, historically speaking, Black women have, you know, invented a lot of things that other people indulge in and use, that, you know, it's kind of off-putting when you kind of get into it and see But at the same time, what I want to talk to you about is more on a personal level, rather than focusing on a global problem. Is there, have you faced any racial or gender bias in your line of work?
Yes. There's some things I want to say just to preface what I'm going to go into. Do not mistake Black women's self-respect for them being rude. You know, we've had it over and again. You know, Black women are loud, we're opinionated. But I think like it's very easy, and I'm not just speaking of like, you know, one type of race. It's very easy for general populations to just mischaracterize Black women for who they are. And I think because sometimes we are very kind of like understood to be either this or that, it's very easy to like see yourself, and I'm seeing it now more objectively, see yourself literally turn from being almost deified to villainized. And that line is very, it's not, the boundary is very thin. So in my line of work, I think as a 24-year-old CEO who's a Black woman, I definitely feel like the first thing for me was to just make sure that who I'm surrounded by are people who understand, can kind of connect with who I am, but also are that themselves as well. So a lot of my team are Black women. And I think number one, that's important for me to build that kind of air of psychological safety. And I'm not saying that all skin folk are kinfolk, because that is a lie, but I think it's very easy to get caught up in what we have now is like diversity and inclusion and being inclusive and having so many different types of people around you, and sometimes you just don't feel safe. So I'm unapologetically unashamed to say that my team are Black, and that's the way I want it, because I've been in, you know, places where I just don't feel psychologically safe. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even within that, sometimes, as I said, it's very easy for you to be seen as like, you know, superwoman, and you know, often that's the characterization of people within history, even Nanny of the Maroons, seen as a superwoman, seen as like, you know, having these supernatural powers to the expense of your humanity. So I make it very, very clear to people when I'm having bad days, this is a bad day for me. When I'm feeling really vulnerable, I let people know, make sure that people actually know and see that human side of me as well, because I think it's very easy to just think, oh, amazing, all these titles, all these accolades, and then almost that respect is lost in that as well. And on the third level, I really don't talk about my age a lot. Like I've only really just started talking about it as of last month, because my friend was like, you know, you're doing bits, you should probably start talking more about it. But I think the reason why I don't is because I see it sometimes, well, in the past, I really saw it as something that I was judged by. And I'd often be in rooms of older white males with older women, older men, and get this feeling of like imposter syndrome, like, why are you here, sort of thing. And you know, I remember being on a board once, someone invited me to be on their board, and the first day I was invited on their board, it was like I had my locks up in a bun at top, and then they were just like, oh yeah, your hair looks like a pineapple, haha. And I was like, that's sweet, goodbye. Like I left their board very quickly. And I think it's just knowing that I don't have to tolerate that disrespect. I don't have to, you know, I don't have to be in environments where I feel unsafe. And so I think I'm very aware of who I am and the multiple identities that either people place on me or are a fact, like me being young. And I analyze those very carefully, and yeah, make sure that I feel safe, even though you can't predict or know when someone is going to racially try to stereotype you. But yeah, it has happened. But as I said, I have my ways of navigating that and my boundaries.
That's powerful. In how you position yourself around those things. But I wrote a few things down that jumped at me. You talked about your psychological safety, which I think is very powerful, because not a lot of women in the African community or just women of African descent are tapped into the psychological part of that well-being. And you talked about also feeling like superwoman, or being expected to be superwoman.
Mm.
And I think part of that is in the conditioning of um, having Black women cater to the upbringing of white families, and that either that homes or that children. One of the wildest concepts that me personally I've never gotten over is that the fact you could, racially abuse someone or physically abuse them, and then turn around and have them cater to your child.
Mm.
Like, if you know what I'm saying? Like, that is really messed up. But I think because of that, with the progression of history, a lot of women do put themselves in that role, and try to fit that boxes, and similar to like masculinity, where a lot of dudes are, you know, how they are because of, the stereotype of what a male is supposed to be, represent, and do, and quote unquote conquer. Um,
Mm.
and then another thing you said also is like self awareness. Regardless of what's happening, you're self aware of, what to do and how to react. Um, and even that little story you just told of, standing up for, your hair, is very powerful
Yeah.
because of the fact that, that person who made that statement is not going to think twice before saying that again. Or I don't know, but it's something that, that was probably never a reaction to that before, and you had a reaction to it. So that's going to put a thought to that in that person mind next time. But one thing I can relate to, on the opposite end of the gender, is ageism. Is that I've been in rooms as well where I've been looked down upon. Um, I personally, I don't care. I mean, I care, but like, I'm never like, my focus is never like racially whatever. If I'm in a room or whatever, and
Mm.
I met a great architect. I think back in 2018 in Philly, when I was back in the city, and I was freelancing with them for some months, and he was telling me. Funny enough, his name was also Emmanuel, and he was telling me about. Yeah, he was like 75, and he come in with a stogie in his mouth, with his cane, and he walked to his office, and he smoked in there.
Okay. Why
I was
not?
like, he was like, I own the firm. I was like, say less. um, but he was telling me about just like him and I would be having conversation. Like, I'll be working and he'll pull me in. He's like, come sit in here, let's chat. And I'll be like, sure, you guys are paying me. um,
Mm.
but I really love chatting with him because he would tell me about stuff, about, like back in the day, like Boston in the 70s, how to treat Black students that attended college there, and the Black architects back in the day, and things they had to put in place so they could, make sure it was a fair playing field for them. And he was telling me, even though he was educated in Boston and he wanted to set up a firm there, he knew for a fact that he wasn't going to be able to do that because of how Boston is set up racially. And he told me, he said his personal story of him wanting to become an architect
Mm.
was like his mother was a maid for an architect when he was a kid, and she would take him to, and like clean the house and things like that. And he would
Mm.
watch the house and just look around and things like that. And he was like, he told his mom that he was gonna build her house, design and build her house similar to that. And I guess that was the start of his story. But what he
Mm.
told me was, regardless of how I looked at it, that I was always going to be a Black designer before anything else. And so at the time when he said it, I didn't really like it. And I told him that, that's
Mm.
not who I am. That's not how I see myself. But
Mm.
what he was trying to tell me was that's how the world sees you. So That's something you have to be comfortable with in order to progress. And so for me, that is something, you know, I'm always aware of. So if I'm in the room, if people are staring because of that, it don't necessarily affect me because that is something that's already locked in. But in terms of the ageism, recently, my most recent experience was after I left the firm I was working with, 2020 in-house. I left them and we, you know, ended on good terms. The owner and I actually chatted on a podcast episode not too long ago. And but when I left, I got a recommendation to work with another agency in Philly on like a freelance gig. And they was trying to bring me on to work on this sports project for just kind of on like the high end. And so I was excited obviously to work with them. And they had, you know, contacted me and brought me in. I sat down with them and they gave me the scope of the project. And I told them how much I was comfortable getting paid hourly. And there was a bit of a blowback on like the figure. But the dude was like, okay, I'll take it to my team and we'll see what we could do. He took it to his team, came back, and for some reason, kind of half what I had asked for. And I wasn't sure necessarily what was happening. You know, was it experience, age, you know, race. But one thing I do know is I know, you know, I'm good at what I do. And so immediately I was like, okay, it's not about experience. And then we progressed with the negotiation and they got things finalized and they sent over that contract. And I remember it was about 8:30 or so. I'm reading it at night and you know, got to the fine print and all of that good stuff. And they're talking about the ownership of my work and being able to, so a little bit on the numbers. And this project the previous year had dropped and they put out on that first launch, they put out, I think like 200 in total to put out about 200,000 items. And it's sold in a matter of minutes because it's like a global thing. And it's like sports equipment, stuff like that. So they was bringing me on the project as a revamp to up the original design that has sold out. So I understood the value that I was bringing to them. And so when I was reading the contract, it didn't add up. And so I called the owner who I had met in the firm and we chatting. And I was telling him I'm not totally comfortable with the agency owning my, you know, sketches and my artwork and all of my, you know, original files, you know, forever. They had put in the contract they wanted to own it in perpetuity, and it's like ownership. And so, but for me, I'm okay with giving you the work I created it for you, but you have to compensate me. And so I was telling him, one, I wasn't comfortable with the hourly, and now ownership. I could give you guys a 1-year owner's right, and then we could revisit the contract. And we kept going back and forth. And then after I had, you know, respectfully told him what, you know, how I felt about what I was reading, he like paused a little bit and was like, listen here, young man. I was like, whoa. Literally his first words out of his mouth. And I was like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, you are. He's like, I understand you're a young dude in the game, but this is how it is. You know, you're going to have to, you know, bite down from time to time. And honestly, I don't remember. He talked for maybe about three minutes after that. I don't remember a word he said after that. And yeah, I was like, but to his knowledge, or I guess not knowing, I told him, I was like, I understand what you're saying, but I have been freelancing for the last 6 years. You know, I literally put myself through college, a portion of it through freelancing. That was how, you know, I got out of college and decided to do my own thing. It wasn't just, you know, nothing just fell in my lap. But
respect my name.
Definitely. But yeah, but that was so like shocking to me because I have met this dude twice in a matter of like a week, and nicest person, nicest through our conversations, nice, and definitely knew he was asking us in a little bit in terms of our conversation. And I was like, okay, I respect your work. I respect the agency. I respect what you guys do. And I'm glad that you were, enthusiastic about bringing me on board. And I would love to work with you guys. And so following up on the contract and when, actually matters. And he's trying to, play mind games and throw in the age and things like that. And so that, in a sense, made me think a lot more. It was, beyond age. So I respectfully turned down that project, which was, going to be, a decent few $1,000. But after I turned down that project, some weeks later, I landed a project with Freeform, which is a TV network, and we ended up doing some great things.
Respectfully.
But yeah, that was my very first professional instance of that, and that kind of stunk a little bit. But it was also a male to male relationship, but from a racial standpoint, it was a white male to a black male relationship, and so I can't even like imagine putting a female in that story and seeing how worse perhaps that that story can get, because I've noticed that males tend to not necessarily interact but show certain respect when they're dealing with other males that they don't necessarily show to women who are actually at times be their bosses or in more powerful positions than them. But that was very off-putting to me, and since then I've been really particular, as always, about projects and people that I work with. Somewhat of a long answer.
No, but you have to be. I think it's really important to like set your terms and respect yourself, because no one will respect you if you don't. So
Absolutely. What is the most important quality you feel a young African female writer needs to have?
Ability to listen. That was and is something that stays with me. To be able to write, you've got to be able to translate. You've got to be able to translate what's happening around you, and to be able to do that, you've got to observe and then listen to. And I'm not just listening with your ears, listening with your eyes. You see, you observe. Do you know what I mean? You don't always have to verbalize. I think it's just being able to just absorb and push that out. So I'd say like we can sometimes get in our own ways because we're so like passionate about something, and we're not really kind of getting the essence of maybe what's happening or what that person or situation is trying to convey. But I think to be able to have really powerful writing, you've got to be able to listen, digest, and spend that time going back. And sometimes you just got to recall things in your head. But yeah, my grandma always used to say, you must listen. And it wasn't like just listen to me speak. It's listen to understand what's happening. It's a deeper type of listening. Maybe because this is the English language, it's maybe limiting. Maybe there is another word, another language for what I'm trying to say, but it's the ability to capture the essence of what's happening.
Yeah, that's powerful. I remember some years back I came across the quote that has served me well, in line with what you're saying. Said listen to understand, not just to hear. And that stuck with me, and it made me more attentive. And in terms of just understanding, it gave me a much deeper response when and it taught me to speak when I had something to add to the conversation, not just to just to speak. So that's very powerful. Key to being a good writer is listening. Who would have thought? How important you think it is to be stubborn and relentless in the pursuit of what makes you happy in this life?
I love that you've said stubborn. I love it because stubborn gets such a bad rap. Like
That is true.
it's such a good word because it means that you just know what you want. Like when we label things and children as like, oh yeah, they're stubborn. No, they just clear on what they want, and that's fine. So I think it's really important to be stubborn. I think it's really key to be driven and relentless in your pursuit of your goal. And sometimes for me it has manifested in like just staying laser focused. And when I think back to university, what that meant for me when I was did my dissertation on maroon communities in Brazil and Jamaica, I actually had to change my dissertation supervisor because he just weren't getting it. I was trying to convey to him that this was much more than just a class issue. There was a lens of like there was an element of racial there's a racial element in there that superseded just the national. It was a very international thing, and he just was trying to argue with me to kind of get me to convince me that it was something else. And I was just like, no, like this is what I want to write, this is what I believe. And so 2 weeks before the deadline, I changed my my dissertation supervisor, because for me it was really important to have someone who not only would market well but understood where I was coming from. And yeah, God bless Andrew Newsham, big up yourself, because he got it, he still gets it. And I think when you're trying to achieve something, you can't let anyone get in your way or anything. So it's really important to just have that focus, because either if you don't, you'll be there's a quote I want to say but I can't remember it, but essentially you have no backbone and you'll be able to be manipulated and pulled in other directions that aren't true to you.
That's powerful. I agree with that. Definitely 100%. I would say something like that is something I try to reflect on as well whenever like I'm someone who, like, when I'm in season, I go as hard as I can. And like when I'm off season, I'm off season. And I try to, like, take in nature, movies, music. Well, music, I play all hours of the day. I consume too much music. But like I agree with that. I second that. But yeah, music is life. You read about that. But it just, like, in terms of we speaking on being stubborn and relentless in the pursuit of what you believe is yours. But where do you find a balance at times when you do hit those creative blocks, writer's blocks, I guess they call it. But how do you kind of refocus, refresh, and just kind of replenish yourself to get back onto your journey?
I stay in it because sometimes emotions are just emotions, and they are there for a present time and it will pass. So I never really rush myself out of it at all. If I'm feeling sad, I want to sit there and cry. If I'm happy, maybe that's not the reason for the writer's block or the creative block, but maybe if I'm feeling like disconnected, I will find out why I'm feeling disconnected. So I'll do a lot of introspection, and maybe the sources that I just I miss somebody and I just want to see them. So I think it's really important to honor your feelings, honor how you feel, but don't let that control the outcome. So yeah, nature's great. I think for me that's one of the things I like to do. I get out. I also rest a lot, so I'm really trying to integrate into my routine not only the ability to just nap and sleep longer, but taking breaks from things that just taxing emotionally and mentally, and checking out from that. And I think honoring that really allows me the ability to go back into my practice with a lot more strength and clarity. Yeah.
Napping these days is like a superpower. If you had a time machine, would you go back in time to meet your ancestors, or forward in time to meet your descendants?
That's interesting. I guess whichever way you go, you're still going to be happy. So I think I don't want to go back in time. I'm sorry. I don't want to I think you got to keep the vision looking forward. So I'll go to meet my descendants. I'll go bless them. We'll have a cup of tea, maybe a nap. Yeah.
Teach them the art of napping.
Right.
And how important it is to our
Yes.
well-being. Would you rather speak all languages or be able to speak to animals?
All languages.
Really?
I would.
You're the first person who said that. Everyone else is like they want to speak to our animals.
There's a first for everything. I prefer people over animals.
Wow. Okay. I honestly I don't necessarily know my answer for that question yet. Because I'm kind of split in the middle. But I would say I'm more leaning towards the people because of like I feel like animals already know that order and what to do in life.
Right.
People we seem to not, get it at times.
Right. Maybe there's a bit of miscommunication.
Yeah.
Communicator.
I have another one for you. This one is a little tough. Never hear music again or lose your ability to read?
No, I think I'll keep the ability to read because you can still hear the music. If you can read notes, you can hear it in your head. You might not hear it, but you might hear it in your head. Yeah, I'll keep it to read because I feel like the imagination is important. And music is that as well, but I feel like you can read so many different things. You could, you can read so many different things. So yeah, reading.
Very logical answer. I got one more. What's one rule your parents enforced on you when you were a kid? It could have been something like house rules or, personal rules or something.
Oh my God. Okay. So I was not, funny enough, allowed to use a computer unless I was at school. So my mum, instead of me using the internet, like had these encyclopedias in the house. And for my homework, I had to use the encyclopedias. Like, yeah, I think that was the thing.
Wow. Yeah. You think that helped with your writing?
Possibly. I would say it helped me to be a lot more, like, I guess my curiosity, because when you're in, it's like it's just so many facts and you're just like, oh, okay, so yeah, maybe.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. That's something. I think that's a good practice. I mean, probably when you was going through it, you was, a little frustrated, but very good, good practice for a healthy, paradigm and later on.
Yeah.
But one last one.
Okay.
You can only eat one food again for the rest of your life. What is it? I feel like you don't like that answer already.
Wow. It's got to be plantain. It has to be plantain.
Wow. Why is that?
Because it's the best. It's just so beautiful. Like the texture, just everything about it is just lovely. It's a delicacy. It's something you can have for breakfast, lunch, dinner. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I love it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm from Africa, so my go-to is fried ripe plantains.
Yes.
It's my go-to.
Yeah, it has to be fried for sure. But do you know what? People would say now that baked arguably is better than fried. There's less oil, etc. But I'm fried every day.
Yeah, I think that's it has a little bit of nostalgia to it as well. When you do, kind of have a moment to actually eat and not just rush through your food. But before we wrap up, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for, the great conversation we had. Thank you for opening up. I appreciate you and all that you've accomplished with the Black curriculum and continue to do for the betterment of humanity. And I think you are a light that, you know, that is bright and it's shine all the way out here in the US. And I'm always smiling when I tell people about you and what you do. And again, grateful for your time and glad we, you know, had the time to chat today.
Thank you. It was such a lovely chat, and I need you to do all my outros in, in the next couple of years. It was a pleasure talking, and thank you for creating our logo. I think it's just so powerful, and it just speaks to who we are. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you like that logo. Before we wrapped up, hopefully another thing is I hope to, you know, get a chance to one day kind of see what you guys are doing in person over there someday. But before we wrap up, yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed. Before we wrap up, let the people know a little bit more about what they can expect from the Black curriculum and where to find you on social media and websites.
Okay, cool. So to find out more about our work, you can head to theblackcurriculum.com. And we are on all social media, including Instagram. So that's the Black Curriculum. Twitter is Curriculum Black. Facebook is the Black Curriculum. TikTok is the Black Curriculum. And what you can expect from us over the next couple of months, we are in the UK kind of thinking about policy, so you can really expect to hear us more in the policy realm when it comes to parliamentary debates, when we're thinking about actual policy changes, implementation on the ground. We'll be leading that front and center. And then going into 2023, you will definitely be seeing us more partnering up with organizations across Europe. And after that, 2025, our hope is to become international, but one step at a time. So, you know, stay updated and yeah, keep supporting TBH 365, which is our campaign, Teach Black History 365.
You heard it. Teach Black History 365. The Black curriculum. Lavinya Stennett. Dumb, Naked, and Broke. Thanks for being here.